So hi, better late than never. This is my review on the Dragons versus Mavericks game. So we've got to talk about the lineups to start off with. We saw Jodie Gibson come back to the squad after a long time out for Mavericks, which was really pleasing and lots of people happy to see that. Gabby Marshall playing again. Obviously we saw her last time, but on her return to court. And Venter came in at goal shooter, which put Kadeen Corbin out at goal attack. So a good lineup for them, looking stronger in that lineup, and obviously quite excited then about the things to come. Dragons were missing 3 players that I could tell: Sophie Morgan, Christina Shaw and Amy Clinton. Now Sophie Morgan and Christina Shaw weren't really talked about. Amy Clinton is definitely off because of a concussion injury, so she'll obviously be back, but she wasn't there for this game. So that saw Annika Lee-Jones go into goal shoot. Now I was really excited about this because in my last review of Celtic Dragons I spoke about the fact that they have this player that can, is a target in there, is really tall. My initial stance was, could they play her in with Amy Clinton? So maybe looking at Amy Clinton at goal attack with the speed that you've got of Shona O'Dwyer and Laura Rudland on the edge. However, obviously no Amy Clinton, but she came in at goal shoot, so that was really happy. I was really pleased to see that, and it's interesting as the game progressed to see how that got on. Laura Rudland stepped in at goal attack because you can't have 2 imports in the circle, so Rebecca Robinson moved to wing attack. And we saw Claire Jones starting on wing defence today as well, with Shona O'Dwyer taking that centre position, Abby Tyrrell and Layla Thomas at the back, and some younger players on the bench, which is pleasing to see. However, they didn't take to court. So in the first quarter, what was really interesting was that the Dragons went down 6-0 to start off with. Now, this wasn't because Mavericks were turning over ball. They were gifted possession. We saw an error passing into hands, 3 seconds, a breaking. I mean, the 3 seconds was because there was no options, but to be honest with you, that was more a Dragons error than a Mavericks defence. Mavericks were putting pressure on though. They were keeping them off circle edge and pressuring that feed in to stop that ball getting into Annika Lee-Jones. They've obviously seen tall shooter, best option. Mavericks, on the other hand, were hitting the circle edge with ease, and the turnovers they were getting, they were converting through, which was really good play from them. What we then saw as well was a couple more errors. A break in Dragons wing attack, ball off the back line, another ball off the back line, and just trying to get those connections. Laura Rudland started to get that connection with Annika Lee-Jones, and so did Shona O'Dwyer to the end of this quarter, and they started to put lifted balls in. That worked, which was really nice. And Rudland took the ball and started to shoot from anywhere. So as that ball started to get in, they started to then match them goal for goal. So we ended up 8-19. Quarter 2 started, and what the Dragons came out and they minimised those errors. So this literally went goal for goal each way. Dragons came out with the win this quarter by 1, but it was only because of the centre pass. They had an extra centre pass. Dragons were shutting down the middle better in defence, so putting more pressure on Mavs, and there were quite a few times that Mavericks had to play the ball around. They still managed to take their possession to goal, however. There was like 2 turnovers or something like that, where Claire Jones got a turnover for Celtic Dragons. They took it through, but Raz Quashie got it at the other end, and they took it back and back to goal. So it wasn't a direct goal from Raz, but it still wasn't a turnover to goal. Quashie then took a turnover against Dragons, and then Claire Jones, in response, turned it back. So it was literally going goal for goal. Mavericks were getting tips, but they weren't getting intercepts. And like I say, Dragons were holding up Mavericks better this quarter, but weren't necessarily then getting the rewards from this. Venter and Corbin were working well together. Venter was just shooting for fun. Corbin started to slow down a bit. She had a bit of a knock in quarter 1, and she wasn't the Kadeen Corbin that we're used to seeing. So normally used to seeing Kadeen Corbin run at speed everywhere. And she was just a little bit slower, and that determination and that constant defence that we get from her on the through court just wasn't there as much as it is normally. That's not to say that she wasn't effective, because she was. You could wonder whether she was slowing down her pace a little bit to play Venter into the game, but Venter didn't look as though she had any problems with pace at all. She was absolutely on it. Same point in time watching Jodie Gibson defending as well, defending really hard. It was really nice defence in that first quarter. Second quarter, Mavs dropped off a little bit. Like I say, Celtic Dragons were getting depth better, but again, due to Celtic Dragons work as well, not necessarily just due to Mavericks defence. Quarter three then, going into quarter three, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's been you're now at 21-31. The damage was done by Mavs in the first quarter, but as the coaches, it's interesting to know what they went into their changing rooms and said. Celtic Dragons obviously would be really pleased with the lack of errors made by their team in the second quarter, which meant they went goal for goal. That's a great win for Dragons. But what they're not getting is the turnover then to goal to back that up. What they're looking for, I assume, quarter three is to chip away at that scoreline. So they've got to start getting some turnover, and they've got to take that turnover through to goal. Mavericks, on the other hand, you know, they didn't win that first quarter because they were absolutely on point with turnovers. They won it because they were clinical in attack and they looked after possession when they got it. They got it because they were gifted it a lot of the time. And they didn't necessarily get the turnover in quarter two. So quarter three, you're probably going to push your players a little bit to look for some of that turnover. But maintaining that possession, which they did really well when they did get turnover. Quarter three saw a little bit of carnage, to be honest with you. The first centre pass, I think, was a turnover by Thomas at the back, and Dragons took that through to goal. But then their centre pass got tipped by Mavericks and went off the back line. Then there was 3 seconds. Then Mavericks got the intercept. Then they missed the shot, and then there was another intercept. And then eventually Mavericks got it to shot. It was real ping pong to start off with. So that was a turnover to goal. And then we had a couple of things again, breaking at the centre pass by Celtic Dragons, but then a contact by Mavericks, and then a missed pass, and then eventually a turnover to goal again for Mavericks. So slowly they were chipping away a little bit. Dragons, you know, they started off well, but then they could have, you know, if they'd have just looked after their centre pass the second time. And so they lost a couple this quarter. They didn't make as many errors as before again, don't get me wrong, but just when they get the opportunity, the next time you've got your centre pass, then you're looking at making it one of a safe centre pass, you know, the one that always gets to goal. And it just seems that once they get that little step ahead, they almost get a little bit too over excited and then ping the ball off the back line. Saying that, Laura Redland, oh my goodness me, stepped up massively, taking shots from absolutely anywhere and feeding that ball with pinpoint accuracy. Again, Shona O'Dwyer linking in, feeding those feeds was really, really positive. And we just, again, needed to see a bit more defensive pressure in terms of turning ball. They were putting pressure in terms of holding them up, absolutely, and doing that really well. And it's almost like step by step by step now. So that wasn't there to start off with, now it's there. Okay, now that's there, now we need to run on ball and get ball. Quarter four, so quarter three, the end of quarter three was 10 goals to Dragons and 12 goals to Mavericks. So not a huge amount in it again. And if you took that scoreline and the quarter two scoreline and ran those, Dragons would have been so close. And they've just now got to look at how they keep that consistency of looking after their possession, because quarter four, and we went back to the beginning for Dragons. So a couple of errors, but actually Mavericks also stepped up and turned over ball. There was quite a few changes for Mavericks. So we saw Zarinka come on, SM came on, we saw Sasha Corbin come on, and what started to happen is that they started to run and stuff, especially at the back. Sasha Corbin and Zarinka together are very exciting. They did a couple of switches, not over the top dramatic netball, just basic fundamentals of switching to keep that space, and it just confused Dragons enough. And there was twice the ball went to the middle, like tried to go through the middle of the court from the side after the first phase, and it just got wiped out. First time by Zarinka, second time by Sasha Corbin, and it was just that switch. And it's just that learning for Dragons to be able to see that and then offload to the other player, because you had Rebecca Robinson that was free. And it's tricky, isn't it? Because this is something that they had to build up to, because Mavericks weren't necessarily putting that kind of pressure on before. There wasn't that clever play between the centre and the wing defence before. But now that there is, Dragons have to be able to sight that and use it to their advantage, because then they could have played it in. But again, this is where Mavericks have stepped up. They've obviously been told at 3/4 time, you've got to get more possession, you have to turn over more ball. So that's what they went out and did. But not only did they turn that possession, they then took it through to goal. SM was a great introduction. I think it was... It's not that Kadeen Corbin isn't amazing, like I say, big Kadeen Corbin fan and her speed, but it's just off the ball a little bit in this game. And, you know, if you're going to take a game off to be off the ball, well, when you've gone that many up in the first quarter, this is probably the game to do it. But SM came on with that speed that she brings. and just added a bit of feist into that end third. And Sasha Corbin, again, with her speed, and they were just penetrating through that Dragons defence easier this time, hitting the 45s, hitting the centre, and being able to feed that ball off. And then Clark was in at goal shooter as well. Clark actually entered the game a bit earlier, but she was in at goal shooter, and that ball to Clark was so easy for them. Just link it in. She holds her space so well and is such a force to be reckoned with in that D. So yeah, all in all, that last quarter was like an 18-10 quarter to Mavericks. And that quarter was Dragons errors, but mainly as well, it was Mavericks turnovers. And that's the key difference between quarter one and quarter four. Mavericks played a lot better in quarter four. Dragons played a lot worse in quarter one. So it's interesting when they're reflecting as coaches and when they're reflecting as players to see what they're going to look at and what they're going to move forwards with in terms of what they're going to work on. Mavericks, I would say, will be looking at now, how do they get more turnover? I mean, you have Raz Quashie at the back, who is, you know, one of the best defenders in the world, and now you've got Jodie Gibson as well. They should have been getting more turnover than they did. Saying that though, 41 is the highest that Dragons have scored so far. So a 41-61 final score. Before that, they scored 40 against Storm. That was their highest. Now, interestingly, without Amy Clinton, they scored more. But Amy Clinton has the highest number of goals in the league so far. So what do you do moving forward? Do you keep Annika Lee-Jones in there in attack because of the fact that they scored more? Do you pair her up with Amy Clinton to see what happens with a goal attack goal shooter combo? Laura Rudland, however, let's face it, she took some long range balls. Is it, you know, and scored them? Is it her that needs to stay there? And then more interestingly, what happens at the back? Because if they need to get turnover, is it that actually you need Annika Lee-Jones back in goalkeeper? Is it that they were missing Christina Shaw today, so they didn't have too many options to mix it up in that back defence? I mean, Claire Jones came out with turnover, so it's not necessarily the wing defence position that was causing the problems. The balls were going in. Is it because of the fact they were struggling to get around Clark and to get around Venter? And how do you look at that in terms of how do you get around holding shooters? So lots to think about for Dragons. For Mavericks, probably not their best day in the office, but they are struggling at the moment, I think, with form. I think because of the fact that you have to remember Venter, Gibson, and even Gabby Marshall to some extent haven't played too much together as a squad with this group yet. If you can pull out that scoreline with a squad that hasn't played much together, now they're going to have a couple of weeks training and then they're going to play again. Maybe that in itself is, you know, your saving grace. That's going to solve your problems. You can start to look at that defensive partnership now and really work on it. So I think maybe Mavericks slow start, but I can see them really putting their foot down now throughout the next couple of games, and seeing where they can end up as they solidify those combinations. So yeah, loads to play for still. It's so exciting, isn't it? The league's just going to keep changing. And just on the back of this, just because it was mentioned at the start, really interesting debate over these, whether you can have players that come in to replace players short-term injured. I think there's arguments for and against. On Twitter, I've heard lots of arguments for in terms of this is ridiculous. You know, if you get injuries or you've got sickness and whatever else, this is the time where you need players to step up. The argument against is the fact that unless you have those training partners at the moment, which not all squads do, there aren't any that are up to fitness because the NPLs haven't been running because of COVID. So it's an interesting debate. My personal opinion is they can't really change it potentially for this year. It might be a bit late because is that an unfair advantage to teams that didn't take on those training partners? Although I'm tempted to say, you know, still they should be able to field training partners as temporary replacements, because it's ridiculous. Because otherwise, if a player is out because they're going to be out for like 3 weeks, well, you don't want to bin them off for the rest of the season. And ultimately, if you replace them, that's what you're doing because they're not allowed back in. But something really that needs looking at by England Netball, because it's, in my opinion, it gives the advantage of younger players to get that experience, even if it's on the bench for match days, and have that atmosphere, even if they don't take to court. It's definitely a positive experience that they need to be having. Yeah, I just think it's ridiculous that we don't have that. Why would we not have that? And you don't want the option of a coach of thinking, okay, well, this player might be out for half a season. Do I bin them off for the rest of the season and bring in someone else because I need somebody to fill that gap for half a season? When actually that injured player deserves to be rehabbed and come back. It's just looking after the player. It just makes sense. But obviously the rules haven't been in place yet. This hopefully will highlight it, and hopefully those changes will be made, because no one wants to hear a coach having 9 players to choose from. And I know there's different rules around the fact that, you know, if you've got less than 3 in each area, you can potentially delay the match, but that's not really the point, is it? Long term, something else needs solving. So yeah, that is me over and out. Looking forward to the next games. Obviously we've got a bit of time off now, but I hope everyone's enjoying the Constellation Cup. I know I was up at stupid o'clock this morning to watch it. I'll definitely be watching it tomorrow and the next 2 days as well, even if it is a 2:15 in the morning. But yeah, it's great. Take care everyone. Have a great week.